Raising teens alone can be brutal. It becomes easier when you are co-parenting with the universe.
Beautifulness.
Okay. Welcome to Co-Parenting with the Universe. Today, I am here with a guest, and she also helps parents, children, and teens. So you'll see she's going to have very valuable information. Her name is Victoria Shaw. She's a PhD, LPC, and an intuitive counselor and spiritual coach who combines her Ivy League training in psychology and counseling with generous intuitive guidance. Victoria is the author of 4 self-help books for parents, children, and teens, the host of Intuitive Connection podcast, and the founder of Cactus Blossom Retreat in Escondido, California. Welcome, Victoria. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too, because I listened to an episode of your podcast today and I really, really resonated with what you were saying.
Aw, yay.
I wanted to ask you, so at what point after, I don't know, maybe it was before, you graduated with a PhD in psychology, did you give a turn to your counseling to include intuitive guidance as well?
It's a good question. So intuition was always part of my life. I just didn't know it. So I was, and it's like that for everybody, but it was especially like that for me. My intuition was very loud. It was something that I was just intuitively following when all the good stuff happened in my life, as we often are, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a frame of reference for understanding it. I didn't have a spiritual reference at all. And for me, that intuition really, the way I understand it now, is from a spiritual lens, not a religious lens, but from the idea that we're all souls having a human experience. And our intuition is that part of us that remembers all the stuff that our human selves forget and get distracted by in this human world. But anyhow, so I was fascinated by these spiritual questions. But to me, they were, at the time, I thought them as like philosophical questions, like what's the relationship between our mind and our body, and how do we understand the world? How do kids develop their sense of self and their sense of understanding of the world? And so those things led me to pursue a PhD actually in research psychology. And I was studying cognitive psychology and cognitive development and neuropsychology. And I got to the end of that journey and my passion was gone. It was gone. And what happened, I think, was that sort of research oriented approach that everyone was doing. And I'm not against research. I love research, but I couldn't address any of the questions that my soul was really nudging me to do. And I lost my passion. So I graduated with a PhD in psychology from Princeton, did a postdoc at Columbia in developmental psychology. And I got to the end and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have a passion for it. So I took some time off and I started raising my family. I had my first child, and that's when so much came up for me. And I think it often does, like all of your own inner child stuff comes up, all of, everything just hit me in the face. And I wasn't the kind of mom that I wanted to be. And so I started pursuing, I had this out of the box pediatrician, and he kept sending me to all these weird people like acupuncturists and cranial sacral therapists, and then energy healers and medical intuitives. And it just got weirder and weirder and weirder, except that everything was like really working and helping. And they all kept saying to me, Victoria, you're super intuitive. What are you going to do with this? And that's when it all came together. And that's when I realized that was what I was supposed to be doing all along. And I realized too, that everything I was ever rewarded for throughout my life, even when it was called intelligence, was really me tuning into my intuition and my higher guidance. And so that was the turning point for me. It was through that parenting journey. So that's why supporting parents is so near and dear to my heart, because it was such an important piece of my own intuitive and personal development.
So I find too that our kids, our children, and even when they grow up, are our best teachers. Because first of all, they're mirrors and they reflect to us anything that that would be in our highest good to heal. And I've learned so much from raising kids. And as far as you said, I thought it was intelligence, but that was me tapping into my intuition. So that's funny because I have a daughter. My oldest is a medium and a psychic. And since she was like 4 years old, she used to tell me, I have a lady singing to me with her daughter to put me to sleep. And I said, as long as it feels good, it's okay. And she was excelling at school. And I always taught my kids, when you don't know something, ask, because you have a team up there. And that's what she was doing. She was like, Mom, it's not that I'm so brilliant. It's just I tap into the field. I just get the answers. And that resonates with, that's exactly what you were saying.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't quite like that. I wish someone had told me that as a child. That's so beautiful that your children had that, that framework for understanding. For me, I actually struggled a lot academically when I was young. I had learning disabilities, and I was labeled as smart and gifted. I went to like gifted schools, and it was all very, but I struggled a lot with a lot of, you know, the academic demands. So I love it. I've had so many people on my show too that say like, oh, I just knew all the answers. And I was like, wow, I never thought to ask there. That would have been so much easier. But now I do. Now, like, I just let the information come to me. And even in a session when I'm giving a reading for someone and I'm drawing on my academic knowing or my clinical training, which actually came later on, it's always the guides nudging me, you know, like that thing that, you know, tell them that, rather than my trying to figure out what I know and go from there, which is what most of us are taught to do, but it's backwards because we have all the answers at our fingertips. Like, we don't need to do it the slow way unless we choose to.
And it's so sad in a way, because what we teach here at Co-Parenting with the Universe, well, I went through my whole story and the audience knows my story, and it was painful, and it forced me to change the way I was doing things with my teenagers, to surrendering the need for control and aligning to the right emotional state and vibration in order to ask, show me, what's the next step? And you're always, an answer is always delivered, whether it is a book, a person, whatever it is, or some work you have to do on yourself. But I'm always very sad for people who don't use that resource, because you make so much less mistakes, and it's easier. Instead of taking a long road, sometimes you take a faster way. So when you work with parents, do the parents that come to you are already spiritual, or do you get to surprise them and come through the back door?
So when I first started doing this work, about a little over a decade ago, I had actually, once my intuition opened up, I realized that a lot of the guidance that would come through, and actually I want to backtrack if that's okay with you. I want to say too, you know, when you are tapping into your intuition, sometimes, you know, it'll be like your daughter, that the answers are in the field. I know where to find them. But sometimes it's not that simple. You know, sometimes we have to agree, we have to surrender even to connect with our intuition. You have to agree to get what you get. And like I used to tell my preschool kids, or what their preschool used to say, you get what you get and you don't get upset. But it's really important. You have to surrender even to the process of your intuition, because, you know, you don't always get the whole answer. Sometimes you get little nudges, little pieces. You have to let go in order to receive, which is the opposite of how our minds work. Our minds try to push and force and create and make and struggle. But your intuition, you have to still the mind, let all of that go. And then, you know, you're shown the path. So it's a really different experience than what most of us are taught. And it's really important to know that. And it's also important to know sometimes you're going to get all the answers to the test, and sometimes you're not. Either way, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, definitely. It took her some struggle to get there. She used
Yeah,
to have migraines because she was a type A person who
right.
needed perfection. And she
Exactly.
had to go through a very difficult
Yeah.
first year of high school with migraines and vomiting and etc. And
Aw.
it took, I think I was telling her that she knew, but it took us going to a very knowledgeable professor in neurology, telling her once it's in there, and of course he didn't talk about the field, but that's the way that it made her, it brought her to a peaceful state. He said once you've seen or learned something, it never goes away. It's just a question of relaxing and accessing the answer. And once she heard that from a professor, you know, with a white blouse and white coat, we say in English, it right away it clicked, and then she was able to surrender. And for me, surrendering took a lot of pain because I'm a double Capricorn. I have a side of me that is very woo-woo, you would say, but I have a side of me that is very how do you rational. Help people? What would you recommend for people who have this control tendency?
So the deal is you're never really in control,
Yeah.
right? At least not in the way that you think you are and not in the way that you want to be. And so when you recognize it in the way that the mind wants you to be, right? And the mind wants to be in control by figuring everything out, thinking about everything that could go wrong, right? Like the mind oftentimes is a trap. It's a trap. I'm not saying that you're not prepared sometimes for things, right? If I'm giving a talk or a class, like, you know, I may think beforehand about what I want to talk about a little bit. Um, but what I've learned is if I prepare too much or I worry too much or I try to do the work from that place rather than from the golden place that is my soul, my intuition, my inner guidance, it never comes out as well. So you learn to let go of control in terms of micromanaging the process of life, and then you surrender control to the part of you that's actually really should be in charge. And that means you're not going to know everything with your mind, but it does mean that you're going to trust that there's a wiser part of you that has all your answers. You may not see them all, but you're going to get glimmers, you're going to get glimpses. And when you learn to cooperate with that higher part of you, that's when life gets magical and wonderful, in your parenting journey and in everything.
Literally. And the way I feel it is when I connect from my heart to the heart of the people that I want to serve, the fear somehow drops away. So it's like, I don't know, in some culture they say that the soul is connected to the heart. There is definitely a pathway from your heart to your soul and to the infinite wisdom and infinite knowledge and infinite love.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, practically speaking, you know, when you have, you know, because we're talking about parenting. And
Yeah.
again, yeah, we talked about this, I think, before we went live. I really do believe our children are often our best teachers. It's definitely been that way for me again and again and again and again. And, you know, because you love them so much and you know, you want so much for them. And the most important thing you can do on that parenting journey is to learn to let go because they have their own path. And, you know, your job is to support them on their own unique journey. It's not to get in there and do the work for them or tell them what they should or shouldn't do. It's actually to help them listen to themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, you become, you know, a partner, a co-creator with them. And then eventually you hand, you know, over the reins and they, you know, they don't really need you at all. Um, and part of that, my guides say too, they want me to share is that it's around empowering yourself and your child, again, to listen more deeply and to let go.
Mhm.
And as you learn to listen more to your inner wisdom, your kids will do that too, and it'll always guide you. It's like the more you listen to your intuition, the more you don't need to control because you start to recognize that, like your daughter learned to recognize the answers are always there. I just have
Yeah.
to tune into the field and it will arrive. And, you know, sometimes it's not in the exact form that you want, but it's always exactly what you need.
Yeah, I think we have to be super flexible in the way that it's going to come. We should be like not attached to the form that it's going to take,
Right.
because I've learned that with my kids, and we went through very serious, challenging challenges. And sometimes it came in ways that were so unexpected, but when you know, what I find is that first, maybe you're going to struggle with your mind and with the emotions that you're going to experience. Like if you're in fear, it's much harder to connect to your intuition. So for me, we use tapping in my business to
Beautiful.
connect, to emote, to at least a neutral state of emotional state, and then ask. Sometimes it's too hard to go higher than neutral because we're in so much, the gap is too wide.
Yeah.
But at least neutral and higher. And that's when pay attention to what you're going to see, hear, encounter, because the form, the universe, God, our soul, they have way more imagination than us in how it can come. Do you train parents to develop their intuition?
Yes, absolutely. And I remember we didn't get back to your original question, so I apologize for that. But yes, absolutely. And so when I first started practicing about 10 years ago, I was really doing a lot of counseling, building my license, getting my license, and then also doing the intuitive coaching and parent coaching. So I was doing two things at the same time. But what I found, because the universe is always listening to us, that, I always found the people that were open more and more, that were open to the full range of tools that I had in my toolbox. So nowadays I'm mostly preaching to the choir, and I'm mostly finding people that are already and I think the world has changed a lot in 10 years too. So I think more people are open to this than were even 10 years ago. So most of my people that come to me are absolutely, they know what intuition is, they are all for it, and they just want to hear it more deeply, and they want to use that more and more in their parenting and beyond. So yes, I absolutely help parents listen to their intuition more on that parenting journey and beyond. And I think the first step with parenting is, again, like you said, it's letting go of the outcome of your kid, remembering that they have their own path, and that your job is to hear the guidance to support them rather than trying to micromanage their journey for them. The second piece too, when we become a parent, what I've noticed from my own experience and from many of my clients, is our own inner child gets really, really, present for us. And so sometimes what happens is your child will trigger parts of your own inner child from your own childhood experiences that weren't resolved or weren't perfect, parts of your little inner child that haven't been expressed yet. And so it's also really helpful when we can learn to discern when our inner child is calling us versus when our actual child is calling us, because for some people, they put those two things together. And so they're reacting more to their own inner child wounding or, uncomfortable or bruising or whatever you want to call it, than they are to their actual child's needs. So so for me, there was a lot of healing work that needed to happen so that I could really be present with my kids and also be present with my own inner child, but keep those things separate.
And that actually reminded me of, it's not, sometimes it's not that easy at the beginning to differentiate those two because you're so triggered.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start differentiating and you start attending to your inner child, a lot of the problems, if you want to call them that way, are dropping down, they're dropping. And the more you attend to your inner child, what I've found for me and for my clients, the more you can tolerate, because the journey is not always butterflies and rainbows, even for our kids. And our ability to tolerate their pain, sometimes there are necessary pains,
Yeah.
growing pains, and sit next to them, to be present, but not trying to manage their pain, because they need to learn coping mechanism. There is a lot of growth that needs to happen. Attending and healing our inner child will make us so much more able to do that and to leave space for them to grow. It's really beautiful how things work.
Yes.
That's what I've noticed too.
Absolutely. And I've seen kids, especially my highly intuitive, empathic kids, they actually go into their parents' inner child and will express things. And so when the parent is doing their end of the work, it doesn't give your child, your child can't wander there anymore and express that for you, because we're all energy and we're all creative.
Yeah.
We're all connected, rather. We're all creating too, but that's another conversation.
Yes.
So again, the more that we do our own inner work and healing, it helps us show up to be present with our kiddos. And when your kid is suffering, and I've had so many parents say to me, especially my moms, but dads too, I can't tolerate when my child is in pain, and I have to fix that for them. And what I would say to that is, number one, you can't. You can't take someone else out of their experience. You can join them there if you choose. It actually creates more pain and more discomfort, because now there are two people partaking in, that party, rather before there was just one. And sometimes it can even make it worse, because I've had kids that I'm like, I'm not going to share this with my mom because my mom freaks out. And then that's too much for me. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it actually makes it worse. And sometimes they don't articulate it, but they feel that. But what we really want in those moments is just to be witnessed, to be seen, to be loved just as we are, whatever we're experiencing. And for, whoever, and for someone to say it's okay, you're okay. And this is just life. And your inner child needs that, so wherever you're triggered by your child's suffering, you need to give that to yourself and say, it's okay. It's okay that I feel this way. Of course I would feel this way. I don't have to do anything about it. I love you. It's all right. I can sit with feeling uncomfortable right now. And then when we can do that, we can also do that for our child and let them know, I'm so sorry you feel this way. There's always a solution. Let me know how I can be a resource for you in this moment. But we learn to stop just trying to make the pain go away. Because when we're doing that with ourselves and with others, we're actually creating resistance, which actually perpetuates the problem.
Yeah. And sometimes we all going to be disappointed at some parts of life, and they need to learn to deal with disappointment the same way that we needed to learn to, because if we don't learn early, then it's much more worse when we're adults, if we don't have those coping tools. And I know that's a very important message, the message of being able to tolerate your child's pain without trying to take it away from them. It's something that is so present with moms. Yeah, like you were saying.
Yeah. And a lot of us have been taught, to avoid it, to pretend it's not there. So some of us had parents that just disregarded what we felt. And oftentimes when you had that experience, you go the other way and you're like, I don't want my child ever to ever not feel seen. And then we go the other way and we're overseeing them, and we're actually burdening them with our own feelings of their feelings. And so again, it's really just about presence, being present with ourselves, teaching them to be present with themselves, and recognizing, my guides have taught me this again and again and again, is that, your pain is your gold. It's your gold. It's not fun. It's not necessary for growth. It's the way many humans are doing it. But it's not necessary. But while you've got it, it's your gold. It's offering you so much opportunity for growth and for learning about the world, what, doesn't suit you. And when you understand it that way, then you don't ever try to take anyone's pain away from them. You recognize this is their gold. This is what they're learning with. This is what they're using. This is serving them. And so I don't need to take it away from them. I just need to support them so that they can, get the full range of how it's serving them. And even then, sometimes supporting your child is taking a step back and letting them just be where they are. Sometimes our kids invite consequences into their lives that, they need to experience in order to understand, well, if I do this, that's going to happen. Oh, maybe I don't want to go that way anymore. Right. And so if we're trying to stand between them and the wall that they keep wanting to ram their head into, if you have one of those children, then we're just getting, their cement head in our belly, and they're not learning anything. So it's just really important to let them experience their lives, the consequences of their own actions, and then keep tapping into our own inner wisdom and inner guidance and say, all right, how can I show up here?
Mhm.
And the answer can be very surprising and not what your, mind is nudging you to do at all.
Yeah. And I had a question that came to my mind. Is there a way for a mother, because some kids are in pain, but some kids are somehow in suffering, and those are two
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
How can a parent differentiate between the two and know that maybe it's time to have a professional help in there?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful question, especially for someone who also is a professional counselor some days. Um, yeah, so I mean, I love the distinction between pain and suffering because I think pain is just that visceral experience of, ooh, something doesn't feel right, something doesn't feel good. And suffering is when our mind gets involved and starts telling us a story about what's going on, which tends to increase our discomfort. But I also think, the second piece in there is how do you know when your kid needs outside support? I think that when you're feeling very overwhelmed, that's a good time to check in with them and ask them. I think a lot of times our schools, other people will give us that nudge. And sometimes your kid will tell you, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And, oftentimes parents think that it is their job because, these beautiful beings came out of their bodies, or came from their DNA. It's my job to do everything myself. And as someone who has professionally counseled and coached other people's children now for over a decade and has 2 children of my own, I will tell you that sometimes it's really good if you're not the one doing it. The number of parents that say to me, "Wow, when I say it, like, it was just crickets chirping, but then when you said it to my child, they were like, 'Oh, yeah.'" And, I would be like, "Yeah, my children don't listen to me either." It's normal and natural because we have so much in that relationship. We have so much investment. We have, like I said, our own stuff. We have the very close dynamic. And then also as our kids get older, too, you know, tween, teen especially, that's when they really when they come to us, to the parent, they just naturally think like, "Oh, this means I can't solve the problem myself." But when it comes out of the mouth of another adult, it's like, "Oh, this is a resource that I am using," right? And so it guides them towards their independence. So a lot of times I think if you're really struggling, having another person in there, one, you get another perspective who's not enmeshed in the sometimes drama that we have with our
Yeah.
kids, but also as the kids get older, especially, I really recommend having adult resources that aren't you because it helps your child move towards independence. And then they're always going to come back and you'll be a member of their team. That's what you really want. When your kids leave the nest, you want to be a member of their support team,
Yeah.
but you don't want to be the only one. Because you don't want them to feel like they need to depend on you because that takes away their independence and it's burdensome for you.
Then it becomes a codependent relationship that's good for no one.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and
And it's not necessary.
no, no. And plus they want to dissociate, not dissociate, but become independent from us to
Right.
become their own selves. So that's also the reason
Yeah.
why they don't always listen to what we say.
Right. But a lot of times too, I feel that when you do that journey wisely and you are able to let go and let your child go, they will come back.
Yes, they
When
do.
they know that, they will value your perspective when they know that they don't have to listen to you
Yeah.
unconditionally, which is what a lot of kids think. And what, look, when the kids are little, what do we say? Like, do what I tell you to do. And so as they move towards independence, sometimes they don't want your advice because in their mind they have to listen to you.
Yeah.
And you don't know best. You
No,
all
we don't.
actually never know best. If you really are deeply listening to your child, even when they're really, really little, you might get a different answer on how to parent them than your mind is telling you, though, there are basic things that we learn to keep them safe and it works well enough. But by the time they're in their, tweens, teens, and 20s, they really have a pretty good sense of what they need. And we want to start directing them to their inner wisdom, if not even earlier than that.
Yeah. How can people get a hold of you if they want to? You have the podcast, but
Yes, ma'am.
what else?
So yeah, I have the podcast Intuitive Connection, and we talk about everything. We don't talk about parenting enough. So it's making me think we need to get that on there. But we talk a lot about how to connect with your inner wisdom, and that is a great way to use all the tools that we're talking about today, because once you start to listen to that, it will flow in all aspects of your life.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it doesn't steer you wrong ever.
No, it can't. It can't. Sometimes we don't hear it right, but it's always telling us the truth. And the more you learn to align, the more you get all that good wisdom and guidance just flowing to you 24/7. And then I also do individual sessions I do parent coaching in the state of Connecticut. I'm still a licensed professional counselor. And I do all sorts I work with kids, mostly online, or here in San Diego, I do counseling and coaching through, my office here. So I do all of those things, and you can find all of that information on my website, which is victoriashawintuitive.com. Shaw's SHAW. And so you can find me there. And then I do a lot of teaching, both live and online. And then we do retreats over at Cactus Blossom as well. So we often do parenting retreats and intuition development retreats and fun stuff there as well.
I'll put your website in all the information in the comment.
Thank you.
And maybe I'll come visit you, because my daughters are in the US still. I lived 25 years in the US, so I go at least once, twice a year. So, and I love your area.
I would love that. That would be amazing. We would love to have you.
One last nugget of wisdom, or one thing you would love to leave the audience with?
Oh, I love this. So what's coming through is to share with listeners that you have all of your answers within you. You have all of your answers for whatever you seek, whatever you want to know, whatever guidance you need, whatever love you need, whatever soothing you need. You have it all within you. And so you just need to learn to listen. And everything about life, tells us listen to your mind, listen to your thoughts, listen to what you've been told. But when you learn to listen to your soul, that's when everything changes. And your children have that too. So never forget that we are all born with that connection. And that when you respect the integrity of your child's inner knowing, and when you listen to your own inner knowing, right, those two things together, that's when everything about that parenting relationship changes. And that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah, it's becoming sometimes miraculous even. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning to listen to you and allowing them to listen to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And knowing that they have it too. So you don't have to go in there and do it for them.
Their wise being.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have all their answers. And so do you.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for being here today. I loved everything you talked about, and I'm very aligned with what you're saying, and I'm sure the audience will be too. For our audience, thank you for being here. Of course, you can always put questions, comments below for me or for Victoria, and we'll be delighted to answer you. Bye for now.